Welcome back. Still here with us from Vienna, Austria is Caroline Batka. Caroline, thanks for staying with us. We were talking about the DoD's involvement in the growth of the sector, but I did want to talk briefly about what perhaps you might see as whether the growth of the sector has been perhaps a testament to the limited number of resources available at the disposal of regular militaries, or do you see that as being an independent factor?
Yeah, I think that there's many factors sort of going on at the same time as we see the changing security and war landscape trend in different directions. So because the threats are dispersed and diverse, militaries are seeing that they need to be ready for a number of different challenges and threats ahead. And what that means is it needs personnel with different skills and abilities, but also that it needs a range of different technical equipment, which is extremely expensive. So we've seen instances where militaries have had trouble affording and keeping equipment that it needs to execute on its missions. And also that contractors are used because of these technical needs to fill that gap. They tend to be military and security personnel, so former police officers, former highly skilled military personnel, and they're able to come back in and fill the gaps and what is purported to be at a cheaper cost for those militaries.
There's also an argument being made, against, for example, the DoD relying perhaps even heavily on private military corporations because, the reliance on private firms means that an integral part of one's strategic success, for example, is vulnerable to changes in the market. Perhaps their stocks might not be doing so well, and they might not be able to conduct the operations adequately if need be. And so there seems to be a shift in power away from the clients to the industry itself. Do you see that? Do you see that as a potential risk for these government departments?
So I think I see the point that you're getting at, that people are concerned that having these contractors and the high reliance on them as outside actors could put the state militaries at risks, that they don't have the personnel or the capabilities in-house. So I think that it is potentially a concern if the contractors are unable to fulfill their missions. So they do, especially the research that I have made has underscored this importance on accepting and integrating contractors into the policy and the modus operandi. Some tend to get into a moral debate about what it means to have non-state actors engaged in war and to heavily rely on them. But a lot of militaries, including the US military, have actually become sort of a tight combat fighting force. So a lot of these, what they call inherently governmental positions and functions, are kept within the US military. And the functions that are not considered inherently governmental or not even considered closely associated with inherently governmental positions are outsourced. So the benefit and part of using contractors is that they've saved state troops from the sort of tedium of peeling potatoes and some of the services that are required in war that are not associated with actually military and the military itself, like things like base support and water and other basic human services that the U.S. military and other militaries are happy to outsource.
Do you think there's like a misconception around just how much power these companies wield? Because I did also read somewhere that many of these enterprises, and I quote, are little more than temporary associations operating out of small rented rooms with little more than a telephone and a fax machine. So, I mean, are we missing like the scale and the spectrum of firms that are available at a government's disposal?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a big problem, and more research is needed in this area because people tend to think of contractors as, the guys with the beards and the Kevlar vests that are wielding guns. But really, this is, in some cases, like you said, it's a I think the last estimate I saw was that this is a $200 billion industry per year. It's a huge industry, and the contracting firms that are working in the industry range hugely in size. And providing everything from these security support services, like the guys in the Kevlar vests, but also intelligence and analysis support, and the range of base support and logistical services, like I mentioned.
And you also talked about, switching over to oversight for a second, you talked about how the DoD has improved oversight of these companies in recent years. Has that really changed things on the ground, or are we still continuing to see perhaps the same problems, but with, modern solutions maybe?
Mm-hmm. So I think from my research specifically on DoD, I think that there have been major improvements in the areas of oversight. There have been less scandals in the news, although they continue to persist, and issues with fraud, waste, and abuse, of course, continue to persist as they do in any contracting realm. But we've seen that within the Department of Defense, the programs and management have improved, and also beyond the DoD, there have been major efforts to improve training. The ISOA is one organization of contracting. It's like a trade association for contracting organizations, and they aim to improve access to whistleblowing, if that's something that's needed, as well as important training for issues like women, peace, and security, and how that fits into the security contracting realm, as well as a number of other ways to sort of get a group mentality and approach towards holding higher standards for human rights and for professional behavior downrange.
Well, speaking of human rights, I mean, do you fear that because these companies are answerable to shareholders and perhaps even to some degree their profit margins, that the public good might risk taking a backseat to those drivers?
So I think that there are obviously some concern about the contractors and some of the past issues recurring. But I do think that when states seek to hire contractors, that they are really looking for a cost-effective approach to execute on their missions. And they have those best interests at heart. So really the name of the game in research and in improving the programming on contractors is to enhance oversight and enhance this professional approach to engaging in these contingency operations. And
just to get a sense of the revenue streams, what are some key revenue streams that we're seeing among these companies, especially in the last few years? Because the number of wars occurring around the world have obviously reduced a significant amount in the past 2 decades alone. So their revenue streams are coming from where exactly now?
So we've seen this, the nature of contracting shift as the wars have shifted as well. So the U.S. in the summer, in August, ended its boots on the ground presence in Afghanistan. So with that, the contractors also were pulled back. But we've seen that contractors have been very helpful in the maintenance and operation of drones. We've even seen, this large presence of contractors in areas like space operations. The space operations of the U.S. are heavily pushed forward by private contractors. And that as cyber warfare, plays a bigger role in our security environment, so have securities stepped up to help fill the gaps in those areas. Another area in Africa and the Middle East and other regions of the globe, we've seen peace building and peacekeeping operations be heavily assisted by contractors who have not just the tactical ability to be on the ground and assist in those areas like border security and in areas like boating, but also in like the war on drugs in South America and other areas of the globe. Security contractors continue to play a major role.
And speaking of peacekeeping operations, I mean, Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the UN, was famously quoted as saying that he did consider turning to private military contractors, especially during the Rwandan genocide, to aid soldiers on the ground over there. But he decided that the world may not be ready for privatized peace yet. Are we closer to that point, in your opinion, right now?
So the UN does now heavily use contractors as part of their operations. And to give a short answer, I would say yes. I mean, contractors play a huge role in peace building and peacekeeping operations all over the globe. Like I said, in these essential areas like border security and democracy, where we're looking at areas where voting is needed and should be done effectively, contractors can play a really important role in some of the values of democratic governments.
And you're expecting the industry to obviously continue to grow, or do you think there would be more guardrails on it as we start to, move closer or further away from perhaps these conflicts that are happening globally?
I think, at the beginning of this interview, I talked about PMCs being interstitial organizations. And what I think we can expect to see happen is that they will continue to fill the gaps in the security and warfare market, and that they will continue to play a different and changing role as the security landscape continues to evolve.
Caroline Batka, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Drew.
Well, that's it from us here on All About Money. We'll see you again next week.